Here's your drink.
I love.
Just hang on the floor where I'd be sitting.
Welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. I am Bruce Gemmel, and I'm here with my loved one, 30-year anniversary, Julie Rauer.
Hi, Pablo.
Happy. And today's topic is drawing. Now, we spoke last week about the idea of architecture as a verb, as an activity, rather than simply a noun, and that we do things. This is our 30th anniversary.
Yes.
And we met drawing.
Yes, we did.
And we've done several different drawing things. Now we currently draw at the Metropolitan Museum. And it's been quite an enjoyable kind of endeavor. Anyway, so the point is, last week we talked about architecture, which is my field of study, and actually something, even though Julie is a writer and a painter, actually quite a valuable and talented architect. And we've been able to see that by her, not only by her own work, but by her incredible criticism of architectural projects on various architectural juries that we've been on together. And in fact, given the fact that, Julie understands the nature of architecture, I think a key component of that is through her understanding the value of drawing. Mm-hmm. How would you see yourself in terms of how does drawing help you understand architecture?
How does drawing help me understand architecture?
Mm-hmm.
Well, visualizing form, mass, and structure in space.
Mm-hmm.
In situ, in borrowed environments, in alien spaces, interior and surprising exterior space exchanges, meaning things that say the architecture of the human body, human physiology, interior space as it's taken outside, meaning when you see a specimen in a medical lab, in a museum, you suddenly have interior, unseen, hidden architecture that is now exposed as an exterior alien landscape.
Do you think architectural drawing is different from, say, the drawing of, say, a fine artist? Would you say that the drawings that you see of Van Gogh differ from, say, the drawings of Leonardo? I would consider architecture that the realm of Leonardo and Van Gogh, very much a painter.
Well, yes, I don't see Leonardo as much as an architect as I do an engineer, an inventor. I don't see Leonardo as much as an architect, actually. I see him almost more as a scientist and an engineer.
But do you see that idea of what you talked about in terms of your understanding of drawing as something you would say is akin to the way you would say that Leonardo would draw?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Leonardo drew as a speculist. He drew as somebody who's a medical doctor would draw. He draws as Sigmund Freud drew eels and neurons in the human brain. He drew with a very informed eye, a very adventurous eye, and the eye of one who studies as a medical doctor or a researcher would study in a laboratory before there were,
So would you say it's fair to say that he illustrates and attempts to understand that which he's drawing from?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Because I think that,
Sorry,
I've made it clear.
Being in the frame.
I don't really. Well, I think we're not. See, you have no middle. No, it's true. Your legs.
To the side.
Yeah, true. So
that's better. Thank you.
Now you're kind of also it's nice because you have this beautiful olive-shaped face and head, and it's kind of it's kind of highlighted by your being in the background of the laboratory.
The dark laboratory. I like that.
Or the library, whichever we call it. Anyway, so the reason why I kind of felt a kinship. Oh my God, that's beautiful. You have such a beautiful
thank
head.
you.
You should shave your head.
I thought about it.
Yeah. It's always such a radical thing. It just seems so silly. When
Yeah.
women do it, it's like, it just
Well,
looks
it's pretty
stupid.
silly. It's
Yeah, I
only
think-
if I'm going on a covert mission.
There you go. Essentially. Oh, well, you couldn't tell me. You have to kill me.
Yes. I
Yeah. Okay.
shouldn't have
So
really mentioned
you shouldn't
it.
have mentioned it. Yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah.
happy anniversary, Paul.
Happy anniversary, Pebble.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Leonardo for me was an interesting discovery because I long ago, I think I've told the story many times. I don't know if I told it in the series about how when I first came to read in the reading group at the library, I kind of found this really beautiful book about Leonardo, and I started to understand how he illustrated and tried to understand those things around him. And as a result, he became, for me, the quintessential character of understanding and illustrating those understandings. So for me, I always wanted to draw. I wanted to have notebooks. I wanted to do those things. And I remember like having them confiscated.
Yeah, that was just horrible.
No, exactly. But it was confiscated by the educational system.
That's ironic.
Which was there to help me nurture me towards my own individual genius, which was well done. Yeah, didn't take.
So the system that was meant to inform is the system
that failed me.
Torments and ultimately failed you. Don't get drunk on Calpico.
Yeah, Calpico, I love that stuff.
I don't know what's in there.
It's kind of tastes like urine, but sweet, like a sweet, like melon.
Milk in
it's like
there.
A citrus, milky urine. It supposedly have a lot of electrolytes. I don't know, but I mean, people love it anyway. So
not these people.
No, but anyway, I remember kind of wanting to draw and then kind of feeling suppressed, and always kind of like told not to. In fact, there was a story that goes when I was in high school, I had taken the required. I had taken middle. Oh yeah, there you go. I had taken all the the mechanical drawing classes that were available, and I said that I wanted to learn to do figure drawing. To actually return to that, which was the things that I kind of liked when I used to do the kind of illustrations with Leonardo and things like that.
Right.
Anyway, as a result, I remember there was a kind of a commotion, and it was a kind of resistance. And it's like, well, you don't want to do that. And then eventually I was kind of like told that if I was to continue, they would tell my parents, because they felt that it kind of it demonstrated certain, what they call it, latent. This was what they called in the time, latent homosexual tendencies.
Oh, God, that's ridiculous.
Which was interesting because I mean, I remember kind of telling one of the people, it's like, yeah, but I have a girlfriend. And they said, that doesn't really matter. You can still be. And I said, well, is this a problem if I mean, it was just, this is public high school, Long Island, 1970s. Anyway, so I go to very progressive environment. Anyway, I go to architectural school and you're taught to draw, but you're not really taught. You're taught to draw mechanically. Though in those days we used T-square and triangles and parallel edges, things like that. And then we go, after that, go out, and I'm now an architectural professor. And interestingly enough, a friend of an acquaintance of mine had been a student at the Cooper Union. You know a little bit about the Cooper Union, having been.
I'm a Cooper Union graduate. I'm an alumnus of the Cooper Union.
Right.
When it was the Cooper Union and it was full merit scholarship, when it was the real Cooper, Peter Cooper's original mandate, which they violated and trodden on. It was never meant to be Pratt or visual arts, and now they charge on $25,000-$35,000 a year for it.
But still technically considered free.
Technically, but it's not. Yeah.
No, again, we're not gonna knock any schools, Pratt or City College or Tech.
They're very good schools.
No, exactly, but they
just
weren't
had a
Cooper.
Different mandate.
Exactly.
And Cooper wasn't their mandate.
Yeah. I always felt that one of the things I always admired about City College was the fact that City College was that place for anybody who was like a tough, gritty street kid who wanted to kind of lift himself out of the working class, out of the middle class, and into professional class.
Carl Sagan.
He didn't go to City College.
Didn't he go to one of the CUNYs?
No.
Oh.
No.
So,
I mean, many people have. I mean,
all right.
many
Anyway,
people
please
have.
continue.
But the point was, like, City College was
Mhm.
that place
Mhm.
for that kind of kid
Mhm.
who, wanted a good education. In fact, like, people who came back from the Second World War on the GI Bill,
Mhm.
City College was a generator of a lot of people who kind of just wanted it bad enough and were willing to kind of make it into, a great education.
Oh.
Cooper, on the other hand, was different. Cooper was a place that I believe, again, didn't attend either places. I've been a critic at City with you, but
Mhm.
I mean, had very little kind of like, well, I had acquaintances with people at Cooper, but never was faculty there.
Mhm.
Anyway, on the other hand, though, what I always admired at Cooper was that place where they identified that kid who was adventurous mind, inherent potential genius
Mhm.
that could be cultivated. City took that kid who wanted an education. Cooper took those special individuals that were capable being identified as genius and cultivated into genius.
Yeah.
So you actually just tell us a little bit about how you saw that from inside the institution when it was what it was.
That particular aspect.
Yeah.
I would say that the group that I was with at Cooper were the most specific individuals that I could ever hope to be with. I mean, they were singular minds, and most importantly, unlike people that I knew at various other institutions who like to copy other people's work or try to suck up to their professors by copying and doing the professor's work. People don't plagiarize like they do now. They plagiarize everything. But when I was at Cooper, the idea of being original, a true original, was paramount. Nobody would dream of copying or plagiarizing anyone else's work. First of all, they didn't have to. They had their own ideas. We had our own ideas and saw it as an enormous crutch to siphon off someone else's thought processes
Mm.
or to emulate. I don't mean be inspired by, that's completely different. I mean, I'm inspired by Art Nouveau. I'm inspired by Christopher Dresser and Frank Lloyd Wright and Bruce Goff. They wholly expected you to have many sources of inspiration. Japanese, Edo period woodblock prints. I mean, these are all things which continue to inspire me. And at Cooper, you were encouraged to find really, I'd say, really eccentric, really unusual, eclectic, interdisciplinary,
But
before
compelling.
the word, and compelling sources of inspiration, and then to synthesize something that was wholly and uniquely yours. So the point is, we were taught many, many different things, but more than taught, we were inspired to do our own research, to read, to find our own inspiration. We were never spoon fed anything. There was a discourse, there was a debate, and there was real criticism, which you have had in your broadcasts. You've had whole right.
Yeah, it was like,
And
again,
that was the spirit of the real
yeah.
Cooper Union.
Yeah, I mean, again, like in my situations, like, kind of like I saw certain places and found that it was strange to me when I found certain places that were incredibly, not, I wouldn't even say derivative, but almost like plagiarized. That
That's
like
what I
you
mean.
were this kind of like almost kind of fetishistic devotion to your.
It was.
And it was creepy, really.
It was.
And I remember being in one of those
copycats.
I remember being in one of those environments and just finding it really off-putting. And again, though the individual that I was with, I had a tremendous admiration from, but I certainly didn't see that his own idiosyncratic obsession would be mine. So I just kind of found
why should it be yours?
well, exactly. But I mean, even if I wanted to, the thing was, these things were so highly personal. You're like, you know, why would I have this thing?
Well,
It seemed like a fetish. But anyway,
exactly. But
so the point was
that's at the crux of it. But
that
yeah.
was at the crux of it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the idea was, you know, my own experience with people who I met from Cooper was it very much about the fact that you looked at things that were compelling in order to kind of generate
Mhm.
your own compelling work. And there was a sense of like my individual genius, or the individual genius was what was trying to be cultivated, not slavishly fetishistically following someone else's footsteps.
Sure, but here's what is key that I must mention that I should have.
Then that brings me to my point. Go ahead.
But sorry, I can make this fast. Is what Cooper stressed that I really didn't see any other schools or actually institutions stressing then or now was the individual's ability to verbalize why they were doing
and
what they were doing. Well, verbalize your visualizations.
Okay.
Meaning write about what you produce. I mean, your design project, your architectural model, your, the book. There was a course there that I took 3 times, not because I didn't do well, but because I loved it and I did extremely well. Many people took the art of the book over and over because you produced a whole panoply of different projects each time. And you had to verbalize and write about and research what it was you were doing, meaning you couldn't just coast through it or ride on the coattails of your professor or another student, meaning you couldn't plagiarize and do the work that was being asked of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, like, honestly, you know, you weren't an architecture student. You're basically in the what was the fine arts?
I was in the art school.
Art school. Okay.
There was no fine art. I studied graphic design and commercial art when I was there, but there were no majors at Cooper then. There
was
were
like
areas
engineering,
of study.
architecture, and art. Yeah. But so anyway, so that brings me to the point, which is I think that the art of the book sounds like a very fundamental project, and it'd be a great project for all design people to have. I mean, I think an architect should do that project. I think a painter should do that project. A sculptor do that project, because it's basically really the kind of focus of the kind of culmination of illustration of ideas. And like you said, part of it is the illustration, the verbalization, but the other part is the illustration. I think that's the essential part of drawing. I think the fact that a lot of these other schools either don't have drawing, but they certainly don't emphasize drawing. And Cooper's the only one that kind of, in the architectural school, was mandatory. It was part of the curriculum, which I thought was really, really important. To me, it was a vindication, because I felt I've always felt that my foray and my journey into architecture was dependent on drawing to help me understand. And so when I saw that this was something that these people had appreciated and understood, I thought to myself, yeah, I kind of thought that since I was a little boy, that you understand and you also cultivate your particular position. I think the reason why Cooper was successful at being able to create cultivated individuals rather than just clones, was the fact that drawing really sets you apart from other people, and the fact that your ability to illustrate comes from the way in which you think, and that comes from the way in which you illustrate or draw. And I then came to understand that the way I saw it was that, when people teach you to, in fact, we felt that, no, you don't want anyone to teach you to draw. You want to learn to draw by yourself. And when we've seen people who kind of have drawing studios, and we kind of have a little experience of that too, is they would kind of like not think about seeing or expressing or illustrating, but technique. And the technique was, well, like you could hatch from the top like this, or you could kind of like do this, or you could do the circly things. And it seemed like people were teaching you more the way in which you should illustrate.
It was rote.
Right. So they were teaching you how you should illustrate, not what you saw and needed to illustrate. And it just seemed as if like the individual expression was missing. And I think that was because a lot of these people didn't
Mhm.
really have that innate capability.
No.
So for me, it really was that drawing was the instrument of understanding. And in order to have that very singular endeavor, it had to be a personal endeavor. And, you know, you were actually learning to see through drawing, not drawing. Because I think that actually drawing is very easy, seeing is hard. In fact, we had a conversation
Oh, it's like
tonight.
a herd of elephants up there.
Well, I mean, they're cleaning up after their party.
Yeah, and they're fat.
Anyway, yeah, but they won't come through. I mean, this is like these.
Yeah,
It's an
they
older
are
building,
fat,
but
yeah.
still, I mean, I don't think they're that fat. I mean, I think if they both stood in the same place,
No.
I don't. Well, if they both stood in the center
Yeah,
of the
they
room,
probably fall right through the
yeah, but
ceiling.
that's over there. We're
We
over
have
here.
fat, noisy neighbors.
Yeah, but they're okay.
Yeah, all
Not
right.
the worst.
Anyway.
We've had worse neighbors. Anyway,
Yeah.
so for me, in fact, when we're talking this evening, we're talking about the fact that, like, when we're talking with a colleague and he's asking us
Mhm.
what we think, we're saying, well, what is your objective? And it seemed as if, like, it was kind of like he comes from a photography background. Photography and
lighting and
And-
studios.
And it's like it seemed as if, like, this was he understands how to light something to make it bright, to make it this,
to
and
make
that.
it sell.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was never a sense of, like, what do you find compelling about the object that you're choosing, that you're trying to recognize?
No, it didn't go into the
Yeah.
abstraction of thought about
In fact,
it.
though he had a very, I'd say, though it was very technically accomplished, it seemed as if what we were trying to get him to understand was, what is your objective in terms of what it is you're trying to express?
Yeah.
And I think
He
that was
really
the kind of
thought about it.
no, I think because I don't think a lot of people
No.
do, because I think this is a really key part, is the fact that, like,
Mhm.
you're looking to see and understand something. Thank you, Papa. Yeah, you're looking to see and
And I have
understand
a key
something,
point.
and drawing really helps you do that.
Mhm.
But the thing is, the only way to get to that is to kind of find your own way.
Mhm.
And I don't think you benefit by having people telling you, okay, let's do a 5-minute session and then a 30-second session. And then, like,
The remedial stuff is deadening.
yeah, in fact,
It
what's
is.
interesting
Yeah,
was,
this
like,
is-
in fact, here's a good story.
yeah,
Is
it's
that,
a
like,
great
I
story.
remember.
Then I have a really important
Cool.
point.
Oh, say it first then.
Oh, okay. What they did at Cooper, which is something I've never seen anywhere else, is they made drawing your primary language of communication.
Hmm.
And this is very important.
Hmm.
People didn't see drawing there as extracurricular, as an addendum, as a hobby, or even as, say, a vocation in school. They made drawing a language on equal footing with speaking English or speaking Spanish or speaking French.
Hmm.
It was as if you were being taught an entirely different language.
Hmm.
And I will give very specific examples. We were expected to learn to be comfortable with the communication. We drew typefaces, we drew letter forms, we invented alphabets, we drew packaging. In graphic design, we were expected to stand up at a whiteboard and draw a system of packaging for a restaurant. We would draw three-dimensionally, we would draw the typography. We were expected to draw an entire marketing scheme. Then we would draw the sets for an opera. Then we would draw the instruments that would play in the orchestra at the opera.
Mm.
We were expected to use our drawing as much as we would use English to express ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things we had.
You understand
Yeah,
what
it
I'm
makes
saying?
sense, and in fact, it
Yeah.
makes sense in a very important way. I think
So-
one of the things we both lamented is the death of 2D design.
Oh God, yeah.
And one of the things I always used to enjoy was every year I would go to the end of the year show at Cooper, which we stopped
Just-
going to recently. But
I'm stretching.
oh, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, like, you would go there and you would see that there really was a great vocabulary
Mhm.
in understanding two-dimensional design and color.
Mhm.
And these were kind of fundamental things
Mhm.
that just by seeing them illustrated, you
Mhm.
started to kind of pick up tips. Of course, you studied it directly in the
Mhm.
the mid 80s. But what was interesting was over time, and they would do the Albers color studies,
Mhm.
and we started to see them just become they did them, but they really, you could see the loss of the understanding of the principles. You know what I mean? And that was the thing that was kind of interesting. One of the things I do remember, because I had a friend who was a painter, and she understood, as you understood, that, you know, the last thing you would ever do is have a shadow line by putting one piece of the colorated paper on top of the other piece.
God,
And you're like, you know, it was when I would look at these things,
ever dream of doing.
when I looked at those Albers color studies, especially the two where you take, you know, two colors and make them the same and one color look as different as possible, there was just incredibly immaculate construction, almost like you were building a cabinet. You know, like I saw the greatest craftsmanship.
Furniture design,
oh my God. No,
jewelry design.
But the point was, these things were crafted, you know, and you could see they were just perfectly done. And then one of the, just before we stopped going, when we went there, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, when we stopped, it was just like, we just saw as if they were still doing it, but they didn't really understand what they were doing.
Yeah,
and the transparency studies and the other studies, they weren't even coherent. I mean,
they glue all over them.
God. But also the thing is, they were poor.
Yeah,
they were poor solutions.
Yeah, they
didn't work.
Yeah.
Exactly, which was
if they don't work.
So anyway, back to drawing, which was that that individual illustration was the individual voice, and I think that was the kind of thing that for me made it make sense. So when I kind of found out, that this was what I realized, and that it became clear that in order to see what you were doing, you had to draw. That drawing was basically seeing. And I had gotten all the way through architecture school, and I was now a professor, and I kind of realized that just like any other professors and like everyone else, I had no ability to really draw, even though I had always known. And I thought, well, this is the time to kind of get back into it. So for me, it was like very necessary. But also I realized that like it was the instrument of understanding. And as we said last week, in, you know, the nature of architecture, you know, architecture is the individual who understands, the one who understands structure. And, you know, I am myself and my circumstance in that my persistence in nature is architecture. And in order to illustrate that, I can illustrate that action through my drawing, and that my drawing actually helps me along that process. So that was the kind of thing that I felt was necessary. And I think later on, I put those two pieces together and kind of forged that kind of bond between the fact that drawing was the instrument of understanding, and understanding was the purpose of architecture. And that action was also another action that kind of fed into this investigation. In fact, we were looking last week that we were there was an architect who was a you know, of note of the day, and he was allegedly a watercolorist. And remember, I kind of like, I'd come across this.
God,
and I was like, thought to myself, it wasn't, you know, you could see that he's literally taking watercolors out of the box and doing these things. But you can realize that the watercolors are in no way, I don't know, that the watercolors were in no way part of the process by which he's discovering his buildings. And, you know, in the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll be kind of going more into like why that's essential to what we do. So anyway, that's the basic premise of why, you know, the essential nature of what this is. So do you have any kind of like closing things you want to say? Like last things you want to say regarding?
Yeah. I would say that people have relegated the many skill sets involved in drawing to a kind of a dark corner. They don't, the active and ongoing application of drawing, like I said, as a living language of communication, needs to be revived. And I believe there needs to be a vast renaissance of drawing as a kinetic tool, as an active tool. And people see drawing, even those few who do it, like us, on a regular basis. I mean, we draw multiple days every single week, which is incredibly rare, that it's used to explain things. Like, I mean, at Cooper, our teachers would say, so explain to us how you got here. What is your line of reasoning? And then you would stand up and speak about it and draw your entire mental
Hmm.
process. Now, that also makes one look into the cathedral of their own mind and look at its, look at how it works. I mean, if you are drawing your thought process and your, sorry, thought processes, when I'm a bit tired,
Hmm.
you are also analyzing them to a degree that most people never do.
Hmm.
You are
Hmm.
visualizing
Hmm.
them,
Mm-hmm.
you are manifesting
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it actually helps one to know thyself in a kind of an auto intimacy that you could really never achieve in any other way.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that that is kind of a good way to kind of demonstrate that way of thinking. I think that one of the things is that we also see in our kind of colleagues that we draw with at the
Mhm.
Met, is that there's a kind of a a situation where there, I'd say, in your case, you see drawing as the process by which you proceed to discover artifacts. That
Mhm.
you kind of like will take things that you see as objects there and kind of come through them in order to kind of find permutations and iterations.
Yeah.
In other people will do things where they will do what I would call, I don't know,
Go ahead.
replications or kind of like
Copies. I mean,
copies. Yeah. So I mean, but it's a resemblance.
you're
It's not
making.
it's not an essence. So the thing
Yeah,
is, like, what
it's
happens is,
definitely not an
in my case,
essence.
I look at the fact that
It's a
as it's a
facsimile.
facsimile,
Yeah, I
like a
mean,
postcard.
yeah, it's a
It's a
poster. It's a
postcard. But it
postcard.
doesn't capture the thing at its essence. As an exercise, I believe it's a valuable exercise.
Yeah, it's a
When you look at
perfectly good
something, yes.
exercise.
But I mean, for me, a better exercise is to find what something is of its essence and bring that out. So, I mean, I'd say in my case, though, I don't see my drawing at the Met as a generator. It's
Mhm.
different than my work as a drawing in the studio. I find that I become better at a generator
Mhm.
by the exercise of trying to find what's compelling and bring it to the surface. Like, rather than finding the resemblance, finding the essence.
Mhm.
All right, so that's it for
Oh,
now.
I have a
Say.
very,
Yes,
very
yes, yes.
quick ending. I think there is a mass failing in the ability of people to visualize information, to
Mm-hmm.
process information, and to communicate information,
And generate information.
and to generate information.
Original information.
Yeah. And I mean fundamental information as well as new research, new discoveries. An example of how one might integrate drawing into this kind of a dynamic life cycle. And I would say this is a life cycle of a piece of information, as in the metamorphosis of a monarch. Is I will read an article in a scientific journal. We get science every week. I will immediately think, how can I draw what I have just read?
Mm.
And I don't mean a pattern, I mean get the core of that information through metaphor. How will
Like
I
constructing a
communicate that?
metaphorical kind of illustration.
Exactly. How will I construct a metaphor of the information I have just found out? What can I do with this information? I will immediately think, how can I paint this? How can I write this? And I don't mean write an article in a book report style. I mean, how can I write a fable? How can I write a piece of fiction using this information, proposing new ideas, proposing new avenues of research? And these are all linked in a life cycle, the same as one might have an entity's organic life cycle. because this manifestation or the visualization drives new perspectives. It drives new perceptions.
Agreed.
Anyway, yeah,
Yep.
that's what I said.
Okay. So
Okay.
I think that
That's a
we've
good place to end.
given a base. Yeah, I think we'll kind of come back to this, you know,
Okay.
in the other
We don't want to go on for
episodes.
too long.
Yeah, it's already over half an
Yeah,
hour.
actually.
So
Okay.
next week we're going to be talking about towards an organic architecture, and then
Ooh.
I think after that we're going to go more into my kind of like generation of my own particular kind of things from, you know,
Your particular artifacts?
yeah, and like past architecture, recent architecture.
That'll
But
be interesting.
I think what it'll be is like it's like from beginning little boy to prior to architectural school, and then architectural school through professor. So it's like 1916 to 1990, 1990 to 210, and then to the future. So it's like, you know, it's like it'll be that third. Yeah. So I guess like, you know, to those kind of basic pieces up to architectural school from childhood, architectural school to the end of professorship, and then post professorship, you know, till now, you know, so it kind of splits it into kind of three pieces in terms of those things, and like how those kind of things, what the environment was, how I felt I reacted to it, and then how, you know, where we are now. So let's see you next week. Happy anniversary again.
Happy
And
anniversary.
30 years, 30 years. And closing with the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to all of our benefit to keep it exactly that way.